Growing up, you believe that connection is everywhere. You think belonging requires numbers. You think having many people around you means you are valued. But age has a way of revealing a quieter truth. Not everyone you know deserves access to your life. You start noticing what your younger self ignored. You feel when someone drains you. You sense when a conversation has no real meaning. Your instincts sharpen. Your patience softens. Your tolerance shrinks. And suddenly, solitude no longer feels like loneliness. It feels like protection. Carl Jung once explained that early in life, our energy flows outward. We chase approval. We adapt to the expectations around us. We mold ourselves to be accepted by the world. But later, that same energy begins to pull inward. We become more interested in who we are than who others want us to be. You begin to see yourself clearly for the first time. Your priorities shift. Your values tighten. Your boundaries rise. You no longer ask, "How can I be included?" You ask, "Why would I want to be somewhere that doesn't feel right?" You start protecting what truly matters. Your mental space. Your emotional stability. Your peace. And you realize these things cannot survive everywhere. Expectations fade, comparisons dissolve, noise loses its shine. Your inner world calls for your attention, and for once, you finally listen. Carl Jung called this the unfolding of the self, a transformation toward wholeness, a journey away from the crowd and toward your own identity. You stop fearing distance. You stop fearing silence. You stop fearing being misunderstood, because you finally understand yourself. The older you get, the more deliberate you become. You become selective with your conversations, selective with your time, selective with who gets to hear your story. And that is not isolation. That is maturity. The fewer people you allow close, the more room there is for who you truly are to finally breathe. For a long time, you build yourself based on reactions. You adjust your tone. You adjust your opinions. You adjust your identity, piece by piece, hoping the world will approve the final version. Approval feels like a lifeline. A smile from others becomes proof that you are doing life correctly. Every compliment feels like validation. Every criticism feels like collapse. You orbit around the expectations of others as if they hold the map to your existence. Carl Jung explained that in the early stages of life, we become who we think we are supposed to be. We wear a persona designed to be accepted. We say yes, even when everything inside us screams no. We trade truth for applause and authenticity for attention, but applause is temporary, and attention fades quickly. The mask begins to crack. Pretending becomes exhausting, and you begin to feel the emptiness of being admired for someone you aren't. Maturity begins the moment you question the performance. You ask, "Why am I trying so hard to be liked? What part of me am I hiding to maintain this harmony? What happens if I stop pretending?" The fear of rejection slowly loses its power, because being accepted while wearing a mask still feels like being alone. Carl Jung called the journey back to your true identity individuation. It requires courage. It requires honesty. It requires letting go of the illusion that you must be liked to be worthy. You start choosing sincerity over strategy. You stop flattering others just to stay relevant. You stop molding yourself to fit environments not meant for your growth. You notice who is uncomfortable when you step into your truth. You notice who only clapped for the version of you that kept them comfortable. And that realization hurts, but it also frees you. Authenticity becomes a filter. The wrong people leave. The right ones remain without you asking. You begin to speak with honesty even if your voice is different. You begin to live with integrity, even if your choices confuse others. You begin to value your own approval over the approval of those who never understood you. This is the transformation. A quieter life, perhaps, but a truer one. A life where belonging is not bought with self-betrayal. A life where you finally get to be who you are without permission. Approval is borrowed, authenticity is owned, and the older you get, the more you refuse to live on borrowed worth. As you mature, you begin to see that connection has never been about how many people surround you. It is about how deeply even one person can understand you. Carl Jung noted that the human psyche strives toward individuation, a process of becoming fully yourself. Along that path, you begin to recognize the difference between crowds and companionship. In youth, you often collect people like trophies. The more numbers in your contact list, the more accepted you feel. The more invitations you receive, the more valuable you believe you are. But life has a way of teaching quiet truths. You notice how many conversations are just performances, how many interactions depend on convenience, how many friendships remain shallow because neither side is willing to be seen beyond the surface. You realize you are tired of pretending, tired of smiling when you're misunderstood, tired of nodding while your thoughts remain unspoken. The shift is subtle. Suddenly, peace becomes the screening test. If someone disrupts your inner balance, they no longer qualify for your inner world. You begin to appreciate those who actually listen instead of waiting for their turn to speak. Those who remember the details that matter to you instead of forgetting them the moment you walk away. Quantity used to feel like success. Now it feels like clutter. You stop forcing connections that require continuous explanation. You stop pursuing conversations that leave you emptier than before. You stop giving effort to people who treat it as disposable. The individuals who remain are the ones who choose presence over performance, the ones who are still there when life becomes quiet, the ones who understand loyalty without needing to advertise it. You start valuing consistency over charm, honesty over entertainment, support over spotlight, clarity over chaos, depth over distraction. There is a new standard forming inside you, almost without your permission. If a person doesn't add meaning, if they don't respect your boundaries, if they only show up when they need something, they naturally fade into the background of your life. This is not rejecting others. This is understanding yourself. You no longer need a crowd to feel significant. You no longer need applause to feel validated. You no longer need endless connection to avoid loneliness. One real ally is stronger than 100 passers-by. One honest conversation is richer than 1,000 empty exchanges. Maturity rewrites the definition of enough, and you discover that having fewer people means having more space for the right ones, more room for personal peace, more capacity for your own growth. Quality replaces quantity. Depth replaces attention. Authenticity replaces approval. And life finally becomes lighter. As you mature, the world inside you begins to hold more value than the noise outside. There is a richness within you that you once overlooked because you were too busy seeking validation externally. Carl Jung emphasized that the journey inward reveals the true landscape of life. What once felt empty or unfamiliar now becomes a sanctuary. You start noticing your own thoughts with curiosity instead of judgment. You explore your beliefs, your motivations, your fears, your strengths. Your inner dialogue becomes more meaningful than small talk with people who don't truly see you. You begin to understand your own reactions. Why certain words inspire you? Why certain environments drain you? Why certain personalities feel like home and others feel like chaos? The quiet moments, which once felt lonely, now feel essential. They are the moments where clarity arrives, where your mind organizes the chaos, where self-respect takes root. You discover that solitude isn't a lack of company. It's a space where your deepest thoughts are finally allowed to speak. You notice how much more fulfilling it is to think about who you are becoming than to worry about who others expect you to be. Your imagination becomes a place of creation, not escape. Your ideas become companions that challenge you. Your interests expand because they are no longer filtered through public approval. You find yourself wanting fewer interruptions. You guard your silence like something precious. Not everyone earns access to your mental world anymore, and that is growth. When life becomes more internal, you reflect more than you react. You choose responses instead of acting impulsively. You recognize your values and protect them unapologetically. You learn that understanding yourself is far more rewarding than striving to be understood by those who don't care to listen. There is a kind of maturity that doesn't need explanation, a calmness that isn't dependent on the environment, a confidence that isn't loud but undeniable. You can sit alone and not feel alone. You can enjoy your own company without needing a distraction. You can trust your own mind as your guide. This is the moment Carl Jung pointed toward. The realization that the most profound relationship you will ever have is the one you build with yourself. The inner world becomes a place of growth, creation, reflection, and stability. It becomes your source of meaning, your source of direction, your source of strength. And the more interesting your mind becomes, the less tolerance you have for anything that wastes it. There comes a moment in adulthood when you finally notice the quiet cost of constantly trying to be liked. The tension in your voice when you agree to something you don't want. The exhaustion after holding back your real thoughts. The frustration of prioritizing others who would never do the same for you. Carl Jung often pointed to a fundamental truth. The parts of yourself you ignore eventually become the loudest. You begin to realize how much of your life was shaped by the desire to be accepted. You said yes when your heart screamed no. You tolerated disrespect just to avoid conflict. You shrank your personality to make others comfortable. But maturity presses a new question into your mind. What is the price I pay when I abandon myself? Slowly, courage forms where fear once lived. You stop chasing validation from people who can't even validate themselves. You stop apologizing for having boundaries. You stop dimming your light to fit into spaces that never appreciated your brightness. Self-respect becomes a filter. You distance yourself from those who take more than they give. You remove yourself from conversations where your truth isn't welcome. You protect your time like the finite resource it is. This isn't becoming cold. This is becoming clear. You learn that your needs are not inconveniences. Your limits are not weaknesses. Your values are not negotiable. Instead of asking, "What can I do so they won't leave?" you start asking, "Do they deserve to stay?" Instead of worrying, "Are they upset with me?" you begin to wonder, "Why should their discomfort matter more than my well-being?" You notice how often you once ignored your intuition. Now you honor it. You listen to the inner voice that recognizes disrespect even when disguised as kindness. You rise from the insecurity that once demanded everyone's approval and step into maturity that requires no applause. And here is the transformation Jung described so clearly. The more you respect yourself, the more invisible you become to those who are benefiting from your lack of boundaries. Some will call you distant. Some will call you selfish. Some will call you changed. But what they really mean is, I can no longer take advantage of you. Self-respect might reduce your circle, but it strengthens your life. You stop needing permission to choose yourself. You prioritize your peace over popularity. You become loyal to your own worth. And you finally understand that losing people who never valued you is not a loss at all. It is the beginning of freedom. As the years pass, something remarkable happens. You become aware of time, not the number on a clock, but the value behind each moment. You begin to notice what deserves your attention and what only steals it. In youth, hours feel infinite. Conversations drag on for the sake of noise. You tolerate the pointless because you believe there is always more time later. But later is a myth that slowly dissolves with maturity. Carl Jung understood that life demands direction, and direction requires focus. Focus requires choosing wisely who and what you invest in. You can't give hours to someone who only gives you seconds. You can't spend days recovering from the company of those who offer nothing but distraction. Meaningless interactions start to feel expensive. You feel the weight of wasted time like a cost you can no longer afford. You remove yourself from situations where your presence is taken for granted. You strip away commitments that drain your inner resources. Time becomes selective. You want conversations that expand the mind, not ones that shrink the spirit. You want environments where you feel alive, not trapped. You want silence that heals, not noise that numbs. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of alignment between who you are and how you spend your life. You begin organizing your world around what matters. You protect your minutes like they are pieces of your existence, because they are. You leave places faster. You end conversations sooner. You walk away without explanation, not out of coldness, but out of wisdom. The older you get, the more you guard your time like the treasure it has always been. And the first step in protecting your time is choosing carefully who is allowed near it. When you're young, comparison feels unavoidable. You measure your progress by looking sideways. You see someone ahead of you and assume you are behind. You see someone celebrated and assume you are inadequate. You chase the illusion of enough. You chase recognition to ease insecurity. You chase status to feel worthy. Competition becomes your silent companion, pushing you forward, but never letting you rest. Carl Jung emphasized that real growth comes from within, not from chasing approval in the outer world. The self does not evolve through comparison. It evolves through alignment. With maturity, you learn that life is not a race. There is no finish line. There is no scoreboard. There is only your path, and whether you are walking it honestly. You stop measuring your story against someone else's chapter. You stop forcing success to look like what others celebrate. You begin defining life in your own terms, your pace, your purpose, your definition of fulfillment. Suddenly, winning looks different. Winning becomes waking up with peace. Winning becomes liking the person you see in the mirror. Winning becomes choosing what feels right, not what looks impressive. Carl Jung believed that individuation means embracing your uniqueness. When you embrace it fully, comparison loses its grip. You no longer need to outrun anyone. You only need to stay true to yourself. Competition fades and contentment rises. You trade the applause for inner approval. You prefer progress over perfection. You no longer need to be noticed to know that you matter. This is maturity, living your life on purpose instead of performing it for others. There comes a turning point in life where excitement is no longer thrilling. Chaos no longer looks adventurous. Noise no longer feels alive. You stop craving attention. You start craving calm. The things that once felt impressive now feel intrusive. Loud crowds, constant updates, superficial validation. They drain you more than they reward you. Carl Jung described inner balance as the ultimate sign of a mature identity. A person aligned with their true self no longer needs noise to feel significant. They no longer rely on the world to confirm their value. They find that confirmation inside. Peace becomes the new luxury, and it is far more rare than popularity. You begin protecting what settles your heart and distancing yourself from what disrupts it. You prefer environments where you can simply be, without performance or tension. You prefer conversations that nourish your mind instead of conversations designed to keep up appearances. You lose interest in proving yourself. You gain interest in being yourself. Attention used to feel like success. Now it feels like a burden. The older you get, the more you realize that the loudest life is not the fullest life. Quiet becomes a form of wealth. Solitude becomes a form of clarity. Silence becomes a form of strength. Carl Jung emphasized that peace is not something you find externally. It is something you return to internally once you stop betraying who you are. You choose the company of those who protect your calm, or you choose to walk alone. Either way, you refuse to surrender your inner stability for temporary entertainment. Peace becomes the true status symbol, a life where your nervous system finally gets to relax. A mind that does not fear its own thoughts, a heart that feels safe within itself. This is maturity. Choosing tranquility over turbulence, presence over performance, depth over distraction. One day you stop wondering where everyone went. You stop questioning why the crowd got smaller. You understand that not every person is meant to stay for the entire journey. Some are there to teach, some are there to reflect, some are there to reveal who you no longer want to be. Carl Jung taught that individuation is the return to the self, the real self, not the imitation, not the performance, the one hiding beneath the noise of wanting to be seen. As you grow into that true self, your circle naturally filters, not by force, by evolution. Only those who resonate with your truth remain. You discover that fewer people does not mean less support. It means fewer misunderstandings, fewer disappointments, fewer demands to become smaller for someone else's comfort. Life becomes lighter, cleaner, purer. You trade popularity for authenticity. You trade compromise for honesty. You trade noise for depth. You stop waiting for others to fill the empty spaces in your life. You start filling them with purpose, with peace, with your own presence. This is maturity. You do not need a crowd to feel complete. You do not need constant validation to feel valued. You do not need to be surrounded to feel connected. Your circle gets smaller. Your boundaries get stronger. Your life gets bigger, because you finally understand something simple yet profound. The right people don't need to take up a lot of space to make your life feel full. And the older you get, the fewer people you need. Not because you are closed off, but because you are finally open to yourself.